All right, you're listening to IULECTRIC with me, Trevor Beekler, here on 99.1 WIUX, and we are here speaking with Madeon. So Hugo, what's up?
What's up? How you doing?
Good, you?
I'm good. I'm good. I just made it to the venue for tonight's show, so getting in the mood, getting in the spirit.
Awesome, that's great to hear. Well, I wanted to start out with just a simple one. Just how does it feel being able to tour again after all this time not being able to?
I expected it to feel different or to feel weird or and actually it just feels familiar and cozy. I think that's the word that I would use to describe it. It feels amazing, of course. I missed it so much, but you kind of settle back into it with great joy and it feels familiar and warm and beautiful. Yeah, that's how we'd qualify it.
That's so good to hear, man. And I wanted to ask you. So we'll talk about Good Faith Forever here for a little bit, but I wanted to speak broadly. How was it premiering it at Second Sky? Because that's something I was interested in knowing. You've played the actual physical Second Sky both times it's been there, and I was just wondering how did it feel premiering this version of the show there.
Yeah, so originally it was scheduled to premiere at Imagine Festival, but the weather and the storm canceled that show in the last minute, and so we ended up having to premiere at Second Sky, which was a very different type of setting for us. I was always most excited about Second Sky, but I was eager to have another show ahead of it, to make sure that I was familiar with this new version of it and performing it. But it turned out to be perfect because the Second Sky audience is like a dream for me. They're so familiar with the material, and it's so fun to share the stage with Porter and to experience what his team and himself have curated and created. Such a good lineup. So many of my favorite artists were playing: Toro et Moi, Jacob Collier, John Hopkins, Jay Wolf. It's just all so many artists that I just love dearly. So that was a great setting for the show, and I really was glowing for days afterwards. It really created an aura and an atmosphere within my entire touring party for the first few shows that I that really made it even more magical. Every show since then has just kind of been benefiting from the goodwill and the joy that we received at Second Sky.
That's so cool to hear. Whenever I was looking at some of the behind the scenes videos and stuff, just the whole setup at Second Sky, the whole world they created there was just so cool. And I think that's just awesome.
Yeah.
That even though Imagine couldn't happen, you were still able to premiere it there. So it's just awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So with the new show, Good Faith Forever, what was your favorite thing to add and maybe your least favorite thing to remove from the original Good Faith Live?
So the original Good Faith Live was a show that I was already very proud of because it was uncompromising. It was exactly everything that I loved about music and performance and live shows, and I felt like I figured out the right performance format for me. And so it was pretty exciting to it was actually insanely excited, not pretty exciting, it was insanely excited, honestly, to be able to refamiliarize myself with it and try to iterate and improve. And the decision we made with the team was to spend as much time and energy as we had on the pretty much entire original show and condense it into 20 to 25 new minutes of music and video and content, but that would be the highlights of the entire show. Try to outdo ourselves, not just do more of the same, but do something that would be some of my favorite additions. And I feel like that's what we've achieved. All of the new moments of Good Faith Forever are my favorite to perform and to see, and they get the biggest reaction. So it feels like such a meaningful upgrade, which I'm very happy about. Anything that I removed from the show, I don't really miss that much. I mean, it just felt so right. This version of the show just feels so right. It's the third iteration of it, I guess, by now, because we had an original premiere version and then we had a touring longer version. But this version of it, I feel like flows exactly as I intended, and we got to develop ideas and visual concept that I had been dreaming of for years. And so seeing it all come alive, and I remember especially after Second Sky when I sat back and saw the photos that were taken of the show, just obsessively watching them, just in loop for an hour, because I was so happy to see that vision had actually materialized. Because even at rehearsals we get to get a sense of how the show was coming together, but at rehearsals we rehearsed with a smaller screen, and so we hadn't seen it in its full like wide scale glory. And so when I finally got to see those photos, I was very, very moved because I felt like we had achieved our goal of making, my favorite new section of the show. And yeah.
That's awesome to hear. Because when I did see the show, it all flowed just perfectly. But I also noticed like a bunch of the new parts. They sound. I mean, the visuals look so much different than like the old Good Faith Live stuff. So did anything like inspire this new look by chance?
It's interesting because I don't feel. It wasn't our intention to make it feel vastly different. I still feel like it's consistent. I feel like somebody who has not seen the original show, if they sit and watch through the entire show, I hope that they don't think it's jarring. But I feel like it's just a little bit more. Because we were mindful to like preserve a lot of the same color palette and visual rules and design rules. In fact, I feel like making the original show, we were kind of finding our footing and making sense of our kind of graphic and visual Bible and set of rules and set of methods and set of techniques and philosophy. And then by the end of making the original show, we really understood it deeply. And then when it came time to make Good Faith Forever, I felt like we could go straight for the kill, straight for what made sense. It felt less like an exploration of trying to make sense of the show, but rather understanding it and pushing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And something I noticed about, I guess the main part of the new Forever tour is the Prince. That whole just 8-minute long section of the Prince, and I think finale is in there and stuff too. That section seems sort of dark, and maybe is that like a direction you might explore more in the future, or is that maybe just a one-off thing, just exploring this idea of the Prince?
So, I always thought of Good Faith, the album, and Good Faith, the show, as two sides of the same coin. And I wanted to make Good Faith, the album, a very daytime album. And I wanted the show to be its darker nighttime counterpoint. And so I saved a lot of emotional cues from the original album to preserve them and make them the focus of the show. So the song itself, The Prince, was written alongside the rest of the album, but I elected to remove it from the album to preserve this kind of daytime feeling, and then I released it separately last year, and so it made sense for it to then be expanded as much as it was during the show, and to explore those darker sounds and visuals. I feel like to me it all connects in a way that makes a lot of sense, because a lot of the design intention of Good Faith is about contrast. It's contrast between quiet and loud, and contrast between happy and sad, and contrast between colorful and monochromatic. Like going all the way from black and white to rainbow. It's like going from one extreme to the other in ways that is meant to shock. And so it made sense therefore to I feel like I tried to like make some of the happier parts of the show even happier in Good Faith Forever. Like there's a section that's an interlude based around No Fear No More that I changed up, that now has like a key change, and like it's all of those techniques and cues that are like very, very optimistic and positive, and then make the darker sections even darker. And it's so interesting to then try to create a flow for all of that to feel seamless. With regards to your question about whatever that's gonna be something that I explore in the future, I don't want to say those things. I'd rather explain a creative act after it has been done and curated and selected, rather than speculate. Because I always have a clear intention of what I'm trying to do next, but I feel like once you reveal it, you rob yourself of the opportunity to back out or change your mind. And so I won't speculate like on what that says about the future of Madeon. But I know that it felt right for Good Faith Forever, because one of the key intentions of Good Faith Forever was to make a show that was dramatic and theatrical and big, and so that naturally had me lending into some of those like kind of epic and thus occasionally dark tones.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea of just like trying to accentuate the happier parts and then just make the darker parts just as dark as they could be. I think that's just an awesome idea.
Thank you.
So as you've been touring, what have you been listening to just on the tour bus, going from all these different cities and festivals?
I don't really listen to music on tour very much. So I listened a little bit to the new Boys Noise album, which is very good, and some albums from some of my friends that are upcoming that they sent me that were great, like the new wonderrxjr album that I really liked. But generally on tour, I don't have a studio when I tour, and when I listen to music, I get inspired and I want to get in the studio. So it's a bit of a frustrating exercise listening to music on the road. So instead, I mostly like consume other things, and I just sit down. I travel with a keyboard, so I do write songs on the keyboard, but I don't listen to like produced music. So I kind of only listen to the stuff I'm writing or listening back to the show for review. I'm very like isolated within the world of the show. Like if you catch me on tour, all I talk about is the show, and my brain basically has no room to think about anything else. So it's pretty obsessed. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. That new wonderrxjr is gonna be great. I can't wait to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so with the U.S. borders hopefully opening up really soon, do you think you're gonna have any plans to maybe do an international Good Faith Forever tour, or is this gonna maybe just be a thing localized to like festivals and stuff?
We'll see. There's no plan. There's nothing confirmed or booked right now outside of America, the US. So we'll see. I mean, I hope I get to bring the show everywhere. That's always my intention. I'll only be able to visit friends though in the next month, which is exciting because I haven't seen my family since 2019. So it's been a minute. But yeah, no, I'm every country has like been having a different pace of reopening, and so we're just following the lead of what each of those markets is doing, and then we're going to try to figure out where we can fit the show into all that. Because the last show that I did before the pandemic was in Mexico, and that was one of the most intense and beautiful and incredible live show I've ever done. And so it reminded me of just how much I enjoy introducing like new audiences to a show, especially audiences that have been listening to my music and streaming it for a long time and that I haven't gotten to see the show yet. So yeah, I hope that I'll get a nice little meeting very soon to try to like schedule some great international plans, but nothing to announce yet.
Okay, that's good to hear. So talking about Good Faith, the album, and Good Faith Forever, like the show, what do you think your single favorite moment is on maybe like the album or the show, and then the part you're most proud of?
I think my favorite moment in the album is in there's like a kind of like Stevie Wonder-esque section in No Fear No More that's really high energy and really fun that I like. And then there's also what I call the hit part of Miracle right after the kind of intro singing section ends, the kind of build-up section. I think is one of the like most profoundly Madeon moment and profoundly Good Faith moment I've ever made. So those are my favorite. And with regard to what I'm proudest of, I think that I'm proud of all my friends because it was a pretty uncompromising attempt in making pop song kind of essentially all on my own. I'm the sole writer and singer and producer and everything on that track. Some musician contributed some instruments parts, which was great, but it's a pop song that is not made the way that like most people will make songs, especially electronic music. And so it was a fun challenge to try to write and perform something like this and acquire the skills necessary to do something like that. So I'm quite proud of how that song turned out in the end, because it started as an emotional ballad, so needless to say that it took a few iterations to get it to where it ended up. So I'm proud of that one. With regards to the show, I think my favorite moment to perform is definitely the Prince. it's very theatrical. Like I get like a new like shiny, glistening, like poncho cape kind of costume change moment, and then we create all these interesting silhouettes visually, and then I sing the song, and like it just feels very like fun, and the visuals are my favorites from the show, and there's so many ideas that I'm proud of in a row. You know, there's like the clone section, and then I kneel down to the face, and like all of those, like all of my favorites moment are condensed in such a fast-paced kind of section. So I would definitely select that, and it is probably also as well the section I'm proudest of in the show. So yeah, those would be my answers.
Yeah, that Prince section was just incredible. Like,
Thank you.
yeah, just all the different forms. Like after you did the original, like maybe like first couple verses and stuff, and then when the clones came out, that was just insane. And then yeah, when you knelt down during finale, that was just nuts. All that was
Thanks.
just insane. So actually, I think you might have commented earlier, but what's the earliest song that you worked on that would eventually become part of the Good Faith like era or project or album or whatever part you want to call it?
I mean, depends, because the first one I finished was The Prince, but the first one I wrote was probably All My Friends. Yeah, I think that's the earliest one that I wrote that ended up on the album, and then Dream 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 not that long after. Yeah, it just like all these songs took forever to finish though, so I finished them soon before they came out, but I actually wrote them years prior and just wrestled with figuring out the production, the writing, and all those things. So much of Good Faith was not so much making the album, but learning how to make the album. It was so clear from the start that I didn't yet have the skills to make that album when I started it, both in terms of like songwriting and singing and engineering. You know, I had to unlearn a lot of like kind of EDM-y production tropes and learn new skills and new instruments. And so much of making the album was having a clear vision, but like having to work to learn how to actually execute it. So yeah, it depends on how you count. If it's like the first one finished, it would be The Prince. If it's the first one written, would be All My Friends.
I think both answers are just acceptable. Kind of like to just show like where this project kind of like started and then how it finished. Like just hearing the whole album in full, it just shows that full vision. So if whoever's listening, like if you listen to my first episode, you already know this, but I've said it on the show before that Good Faith Radio was one of my influences for what I play sort of on the show. So it's like,
Amazing.
Yeah, so is there like any news on Good Faith Radio 6? Because like the curated stuff you do on that show is just awesome. So I was wondering if there's any news.
I feel so bad because I actually started like the 6th episode around The Prince, and the episode was looking so good. I had a great interview with Lido that we recorded and some really cool insight. Like the episode was shaping up so well, and then I had so many things, and then it slipped through the cracks, and I just never finished it. And so that's pretty embarrassing because the episode was great. But so that's kind of what happened, I'll be honest with you. So maybe there'll be a new 6th episode of some form soon, if stars align. But yeah, I'm quite proud of those episodes. I think it's a fun little show, and so I'm happy you listened to it. You know, it's I think it's really true to my taste and approach to music.
Yeah, no.
So
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no. All I was saying is like it makes me feel when it makes me feel very understood when people like it. Is
Yeah, I've gotten some new favorites out of the show. I think like one of them, a song by a Japanese house, I learned from that show, and I just absolutely fell in love with it after I heard it. And it was just, it's such a great curated piece of like curated selection of music. So I just love it.
Thank you.
So is there anything maybe at this moment in time that you can speak of that might be in the pipeline for the rest of the Good Faith era, or are you maybe going to be after Good Faith Forever looking ahead?
I'm working simultaneously on what's next for the Good Faith era and planting the seeds of what's next. You know, you always have to think a few years ahead. You know, like again, like I had the idea for Good Faith in 2015. The album came out in late 2019. You know, so there's such a latency. So there's always so I'm always thinking ahead. But I have a number of plans for the Good Faith era still. You know, and we started to announce some. Actually, have we? Well, there'll be more shows for sure next year, and so I want to continue to update the show and add new sections and hopefully have new music to go alongside that. And I want to be so comprehensive in my exploration and conclude the Good Faith era because the Good Faith era means so much to me. It's all of my 20s pretty much, and so I want to make sure that I've fully realized that vision, and then close that chapter with a full sense of relief and contentment. And so I will. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm also like kind of already sad about the prospect. So I want to make sure that I complete it and have no regret turning that page.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So this is kind of like a question I want to answer. But like, I'm a huge Daft Punk fan, and they've been a huge influence on the industry. What was like your reaction when they kind of like announced that split, when they uploaded that epilogue video? What was your kind of reaction to that?
So Porter called me that morning to tell me. So I found out from him, I think. Yeah, and because he wanted to make sure that I knew in like I didn't want me to experience it secondhand through memes about it or like through the discourse about it. Just kind of keep the kind of almost solemn experience of it. And I was very touched, I mean, Daft Punk meant so much to me. So I decided to just dedicate that. I actually cried actual tears, but with gratefulness.
Yeah, same here, almost, same here.
Yeah, and I ended up going to the beach and listening to their music and just kind of celebrating it that night. Porter and I and his friends, we just went on Discord and we watched Interstellar 5555 together and just like talked about Daft Punk for a few hours and just had a great time. And it was a pretty special day actually. And so in a way, I'm glad they announced their exit in a way that afforded us the opportunity to celebrate their legacy. And I took them on that offer, I suppose, and very much did. I got to meet Guy from Daft Punk a couple of years back, and so I was trying to I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh, I'm so happy I get to meet a Daft Punk as he was actually a member of Daft Punk, not a former Daft Punk, Yeah. So yeah, and then I've been thinking about it a lot since, and I try to just let my feelings about it be an invitation to create and have high standards for myself, because there's no way you could be Daft Punk right now, but because you can only exist in relationship to your time, and Daft Punk existed in relationship to its time, and so I guess I try to ask myself what would the Daft Punk of today be like and do and sound like and look like, and it's a fun exercise, and I try to extract also not just like clear nostalgic aesthetic references such as sounds and melodies and instruments, but also just some philosophical commitment they had to their method and their uncompromising spirit. So I feel like I'll spend the rest of my life celebrating, having fun with, and learning from Daft Punk's legacy. And to answer your question, I have positive memories, in fact, in the end of their separation.
That's so cool. Just I love that answer so much. Just being able to celebrate that whole day, just their legacy and stuff. Like I think that day I just listened to Random Access Memories maybe twice and stuff, because it's my favorite album ever. And I was like,
I love it. I feel like for our generation, Random Access Memories is like Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. It's just
yeah. It's so influential. So going back, kind of talking about the tour now. How did you decide the openers, Chrome Sparks and Devault, for this show? And maybe what are your favorite songs by either of them?
I started looking to openers quite late, because honestly I wasn't sure the tour was gonna happen, COVID was evolving so rapidly, and so we didn't really know what was going on. And then when it became clear that this was actually legit gonna happen, the best case scenario was gonna unfold, we looked to openers, and Chrome Sparks I've been a fan of for so long. Specifically the song Send the Bait On or All or Nothing, those are staples of my playlist, and so I'm a huge fan. I met him at the first Second Sky a couple of years back, and then I very randomly, I live in Los Angeles now, as does he, and I was just sitting outside, waiting for a table at a restaurant, and he was there too. So we were both waiting for tables, and I just ran into him randomly, and we started a conversation, and we had a great chat, and I ended up just swinging by his place the next day and just messing around with sounds, but playing chess together, and I just really liked him so much, and just as much as I did his music. And so he was, soon after I did this like underplay in LA at the Roxy, and so we invited him to play DJ set. It went great, and so it just was such a natural thing to ask for him to join the tour as with his full live show, and it went awesome. Like his show is really, really awesome. He brought a whole bunch of like analog synths and gear and soloed and shredded in ways that I honestly did not expect. It is such an awesome and charismatic, performer, and I'm so glad that he joined us. As for Devolt was already opening for some shows in 2019 for the original Good Faith live tour. And I've been following his career with great attention for a few years now. I love. I think my pick would be Pockets. I think it would as my favorite song. But I love his DJing style, especially. Like he's been playing some really cool edits lately of Sweet Dream or Iron Dynamite.
Yeah, that edit was so cool at the show.
Yeah, so his DJ's flavor is so cool, and I feel like it's a great setup to Good Faith Forever as well. Just a great show in its own right. So that was another awesome fit. And so I think those they just turned out as well as I could have hoped.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned earlier the DJ set at the Roxy. I think I saw a recording of it for a little bit, and it looked awesome. Do you have a favorite moment maybe from that night?
Yeah, I mean that was my first show back to like a proper kind of like headline audience. I've done a couple of shows in Vegas and Miami, and those were great. But they're a little bit, markets like Miami and Vegas are a little bit different because they have more of a tourist dimension too. So you get a lot of people out there just for you, but also people that are just kind of in Vegas. So I love those shows very much. But like the Roxy has such a different energy because LA is probably the city in the US that has been the warmest and kindest to me, I think, lately, especially for Good Faith. Last time we did 2 Shrine shows, so that's like 10,000 people, which is a lot. So I knew I wanted to do something in LA, even though I wasn't doing the live show on this run. And so we decided to just do like a really small, very intimate DJ set at the venue that hosted my very first LA show. So it felt like a emotional kind of back to the beginning moment, and so we worked hard to try to make sure that only the most enthusiastic fans would get tickets, this was inspired by a show I had attended by the 1975 at the Roxy, and that similarly was obviously an underplay that was full of only the most diehard fans, and that had like such a magical energy, and so I was inspired to try to create something like that, and so we and then as a surprise, Porter was in town, and so he showed up. So that was a great memory as well. And just I think just the loudness of the crowd as I stepped on stage was probably my favorite memory. I love the proximity. I love the tangibility of that audience, if that makes sense. I felt so connected to that crowd that night, and every minute of that show was a delight. Absolutely, it just made me. I felt like twice as alive as I had felt for the previous 18 months. Truly a highlight. I'm glad we did that show.
Yeah, it looked awesome. So when you were making Good Faith, what do you think the weirdest inspiration you had for a song would have been?
I'm strategic about what I select as influences and references. And so with Good Faith, there were a lot of references that were very much like part of the zeitgeist of good music of the time. I listened to a lot of Tyler, the Creator, and Frank Ocean, and just records that are influential to a lot of people. But I try to also make sure to include in my references stuff that I think is rare. Songs from my childhood that I grew up with in France that I know not a lot of my peers in the US would have heard, or things that I stumbled upon that by accident and that I cherish. So like a big influence on the album was actually Ryo Fukuda, who's a Japanese jazz, who was, because he's passed away, but a Japanese jazz piano player, who has a great album called Scenery that a lot of people know about, but that is one of my go-to records to play when I'm, you know, trying to have a memorably beautiful time. So that's an album that I referenced actually quite a bit. And then there's a lot of Czech jazz fusion, kind of like big band recordings that I got really into, like by exploring the depth of YouTube, like stuff that have like 10 views that I loved so much, and that also influenced the album quite a bit, like certain brass sections and certain rhythms and chord progressions. So I try to like seek out references that I knew were rare, because I think like including rare references is a great recipe for originality. In fact, I have a larger theory lately that I apply to music, and I also apply a lot to visual art, which is that I think that the three key ingredients that you need to combine to make high quality but original art is one ingredient is zeitgeist. So what is in the air? What do you love about the contemporary style of your time? Trying to understand and celebrate what you love about today. And then one ingredient is timelessness, you know, and what is something that has always is almost like institutionally good, you know, classic art, classic architecture, classical music, stuff that is part of this kind of like timeless knowledge. So a little bit of that is good ingredients. And the last ingredient would be, I guess, rarity or intimacy, and something that is unique to you. It can be your accent, the speech impediment, a way you see the world, any like something about you that is just this unique angle that changes the way you sound, the way you listen, or the way you like. And for me, you know, like growing up in France, and having that perspective and those references, those are something I try to like preserve and celebrate, as to have this element of intimacy, of uniqueness, that is as personal as can be. And so I try to like balance those three elements in making music, and so that was true of making Good Faith and in making visuals. So yeah, that applies also to the visuals to the show. A lot of my favorite scenes in the show, I can explain the way that they echo with things that I like that are current. They echo with things that I like that are timeless. For example, there's a scene in The Prince that is very much a reference to the Lincoln Memorial, you know, and so some like arts that has been around for much longer than we have, and then elements that are references to like French movies from my childhood, or like a French advertisement or French logo or something that I saw that I know is not very common. And so I try to combine all those things, and that's my method.
That's such a cool method, like being able to just pull all those different sources together, just make this one beautiful album you have. That's incredible.
Thank you.
That's incredible. So would you say you've achieved your vision for Good Faith at this point in time, at least?
I think a lot of the original dreams have materialized, so that's great. I think the live show, especially in its current incarnation, is close to my dream. I'd say the album also sounds like what I wanted, and there's a lot of moments that I wanted throughout the campaign that I've materialized. You know, I really wanted to do a kind of a museum-y pop-up shop, which we were able to do, and I'm really proud of the merch that we've made and that we continue to make. So I think a lot of like the key headlines that I wanted to see, because at the start of the era I wrote a document that had a lot of it's kind of a bible of our intentions and ambitions, and reading it back, so much of it has actually manifested. There's a few more things that I feel like I want to explore and realize, and I won't mention them as to not jinx them, but there's a few more things that I think are grand and important that I would need to check before I feel like I've completely realized the vision. But I feel like I'm happy with how much of it as went from becoming a dream and a fantasy to becoming a cherished memory.
That's awesome. All right, I got like maybe one more here. How do you look back on the Adventure era? Because you came from Adventure and you made Good Faith here, and they sound completely different. How do you look back at Adventure?
I love Adventure. I'm so glad I made it. I made it as a teenager. You know, I made it from the ages of 17 and 19. And so I cherish it a lot. I love that album very much. I always love the way that people, but like it as much as time goes on, it feels less and less like mine, and it feels more and more like it belongs to everybody that cherishes it and listen to it. And I don't listen to it very often, and also my memory of it has been kind of twisted by the way that I've changed the songs for the purpose of playing them live. So I've heard the like Good Faith Live version of You're On way more than their actual original version. So sometimes I actually forget how the songs originally sounded or how they sound to people in their like Spotify playlists. So I look back at that era with a lot of fondness, and I there's no part of my discography that I reject, you know, and I want to continue to like cherish and celebrate and transform all that material for the rest of my life, you know. So I'm excited to. I'm excited for the way that, you know, time can sometimes make things feel a little bit nostalgic, you know, and that there's some elements of the album that were of its time that are just changed or recontextualized with the veneer of patience and of waiting. And so it's fun to like, I'm excited to see how it will sound to me if I listen back to it in 2050. You know, like it probably sound vintage to me at that point. And so that's something I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I have a lot of good memories with Adventure, but it's also fun because, you know, sometimes I look back on footage from like the Adventure tour and from that show, and or even Shelter Live, and I think like, oh, I mean, I have a lot of great memories and fondness for these shows, but I'm like insanely more proud of the show that we're putting out now, and it makes me excited. It makes me feel like, oh, I wonder how we'll feel about the Good Faith era in 20 years, and my hope and dream is that I'm doing things that I'm even more passionate about, and so that I continue to feel like I'm iterating and improving and becoming increasingly truer to who I am. So yeah, that's what I think about that album.
That's such an awesome vision to have. Well, thank you, Hugo, for speaking with us. It's been an honor.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's been an honor. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of the tour. Good luck at the show tonight, and yeah, have a good one.
Thank you. Have a good one. Good to meet you, Trevor. Bye bye. Trevor. Bye bye. Trevor.